Hi, I'm Andy and welcome to my channel about crypto. In today's video, we'll look at the current market situation. I'll also tell you why I think that we are still nowhere near the market cycle top. And we'll look at a few possible scenarios how high Bitcoin can go in this market cycle and when the market top is likely to occur. So let's have a look at the charts. So of course we have Bitcoin chart here, and actually the last few days have been quite interesting. Although we hit new all-time high and then we dipped, what is interesting in my opinion is the fact that previously around 63-64k was clearly a resistance level for Bitcoin. Right now it looks like actually Bitcoin turned it into support level, which is potentially a very bullish sign. Of course this may still change, but if this remains true, then well, essentially that means that 63k level is our new baseline, which is great. That potentially means that we can go up much higher in this cycle, or even in the very near future. It's also worth looking at our 20-week SMA, which is Bitcoin's bull market support level. We haven't talked about this for a while. It's this purple line on the chart because, well, as you can see, we've been massively above it for quite a while now. So it's not that relevant, but this level is currently getting close to 50k. It's around $48,000 at the moment. And as long as the bull market continues, well, we can expect staying above this line. So basically, this is our worst case scenario. If there was a sudden drop, any drop that may occur is unlikely to be below 50 or 48k level, which of course would be quite drastic from the current price, but it's still good to know that this is our support level. And recently there's been a lot of talk on Twitter and YouTube, and quite a few prominent crypto influencers have been talking about market cycle getting pretty close to an end, Bitcoin potentially only topping out around 75 or 80k. Other people are still expecting it to go up to 100 or 200k by the end of the year and saying that this is the end of the market cycle. And to be honest, I find all those opinions quite surprising because from my point of view, there's absolutely nothing at the moment that would suggest that the market cycle may finish anytime soon. Is it possible that we'll have quite a big correction? Yes, of course. We've been going up pretty much since end of September. And other than those two relatively modest corrections, if we have a look at them, if we measure them, they were, well, sort of 12%, 10% range, which is nothing really for crypto. So, of course, it's entirely possible. And if anything, I expect that we'll have probably more than one correction in a 20 to 30% range before we hit the market cycle top. And just to put that into perspective, from the current price, 20% drop would take us down to 51,000. 30% drop would actually take us to 45,000. I think that's unlikely. We may have a wick below the bull market support band, but I don't think it would have a close this low. Of course, that would be a huge drop, and I think they are still possible, but this doesn't mean that the market cycle is ending anytime soon. And the reasons why I think that it's not ending anytime soon, well, there are quite a few reasons actually. First of all, we can look at crypto fear and greed index. And we've been in the greed, occasionally extreme greed territory for a while now. So those sort of mid 70s on average. But if we look at earlier this year, so Bitcoin peaked in April, I think it was 14th of April, if I remember correctly. So somewhere around here. Well, we were only around 79, 80 on this scale. But what's more interesting are those peaks in mid 90s here in February and here towards the end of last year. If we look at the chart, that corresponds with this move up here and then also this move here. So these periods of extreme greed around 95 points were roughly are corresponding to those periods here in December and then at the beginning of the year. So basically those massive parabolic moves up. And even though we reached higher price here, actually greed index, fear and greed index was lower at this point because the move up was essentially much more subtle by this point. If we go back to where we are now, well, we had that sudden move up here, but right now we're going largely sideways. So it doesn't look like we are approaching the top of the market cycle. We look at some other indicators like short-term bubble risk, for example. And we can see that it's now in this yellow territory here. Earlier this year, those peaks were much, much higher. And if we zoom out and go to 2017 market top, well, we can see how much higher that was from the peaks earlier this year, let alone from where we are right now. So that's another indicator that makes me think that, well, we are nowhere near market peak at the moment. Another one we can look at are logarithmic regression bands. I'll just change it to the log scale. And as you can see, if we zoom out, we can see how market peak was well within that top red band. So here we actually had closes at the very top of that band. Here we had closes, monthly closes at the bottom of the band, and then wicks towards the top of the band. And this is where we are now. So this is earlier this year, where in April or April-May, we did touch the bottom of this band, but at the moment we are still not quite there yet. And these lines, ignore this last bit at the very end, they continue going up. So even at the moment, for Bitcoin to actually be somewhere in that mid-red territory, that would be well over 90,000 Bitcoin, which is clearly not the case now. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to show you are previous market cycles overlaid from the beginning of the current market cycle. So the blue line is the first market cycle, then we have the second one is the red one, and the yellow one is the third one. It's a logarithmic scale, but we can still clearly see that in each cycle, so there are a couple of things we can see here, and there are really nothing new. There are a couple of other big crypto influencers who've been talking about this for a while, but at the same time, well, it's really just, if you study the charts, you can observe this. It's not really anyone's patented observation knowledge or anything like that. It's basically, it just shows from the charts and from the previous market cycles. And we can see that in each market cycle, we have diminishing returns. The peaks are getting lower in terms of ROI. And also, more importantly here, what we can see is that each cycle is getting longer. And if we measured all previous market cycles, we can expect that there are different ways to measure them. You can measure from peak to peak, from bottom to bottom, peak to bottom, and so on. But regardless how you measure it, it always remains clear that the cycles are getting longer. And we can expect anything from 25 to 50 weeks more in this cycle than we had in the previous one. And at the moment we are right here. So if we look at the previous market cycle, we still are not quite, well, the peak was here. So we roughly reached the peak of the previous market cycle. I think we'll reach it next week, in fact. Or depending how you measure it, we either reached it this week or we will reach it next week. But this would imply that we still have another 25 to 50 weeks before we hit the current market cycle peak. In other words, we have still about half a year to a year before reaching this market cycle peak. So basically, we have time until anything between spring and late next year before Bitcoin reaches its peak. At least that's what I think is likely to happen based on the charts, based on the previous data. Of course, this is not financial advice, as always, and of course no one can predict with any certain, well, no one can predict for certain what will happen in the future, but the most reliable thing we have to aim to predict the future is what happened in the previous cycles, and there seems to be pretty clear pattern here. 10 or so years of data are showing us, well, this is what's likely to happen. So based on that, I expect Bitcoin to peak somewhere between, at the earliest I would say probably early spring next year, at the latest somewhere around October next year, just a bit less than a year from now. If you take an average from that, well, that would be probably summer next year. And the longer the cycle is going to be, the higher price Bitcoin is likely to achieve. So while I would expect Bitcoin to hit something around 120,000 if it's in early spring, by summer it should be comfortably in 150, 180,000 territory. And by autumn, well, we can expect potentially 200k Bitcoin, maybe slightly above that. Of course, these are not exact figures, and as we approach those dates, we'll be able to tell with much higher degree of accuracy what is the likely price for the market top. But this is more or less what we are looking at, essentially roughly 2 to 3x from the current price level. And as we can see here, well, in fact, if we zoom out and look at whole of 2021 from 1st of January, Bitcoin's been pretty much 90% of this year, or more than 90% of this year, in the 30 to 60k range. So actually, yes, although we had those peaks and dips, on average, Bitcoin has not been doing that much during this year. Essentially, we just have a very modest 2x over the course of a year, which, well, for crypto it's a very steady move up. That's yet another thing that makes me think that we are probably not nearing the market top, because I would expect the price to go up much more significantly as we are approaching the market top. And recently, if anything, well, we've been moving sideways again. If we continue on this trajectory here over the last few weeks, and we would be now somewhere in, I don't know, 80 something thousand territory, then I could potentially agree that, well, it's likely that we'll have a blow off top this year. We'll just carry on this crazy parabolic move up. Market will overheat, and that will be the end of it. And then we'll just drop down either December or early next year. But this clearly hasn't happened. We've been going sideways. I think we may have another leg up or two, probably something similar to those peaks here. We will have a correction, most definitely, around 20 or 30% sooner or later. If this market cycle goes into mid to late 2022, I would expect another 2 or 3 corrections. And of course, as the prices are going higher, those corrections will be really scary. I mean, if we hit 100k Bitcoin, 30% correction is around 30,000. So of course, that's going to be a massive dip. A lot of people will be freaked out by it, but those corrections are perfectly normal. I mean, we had them in the past, and it was fine. I mean, this dip was 50%, and maybe hopefully we won't have another quite this big, but we can certainly experience something like this. So yeah, I think we are still a long way from the market top. And if anything, I think it will be quite a slow grind towards 100k. I think 100k would be quite a strong resistance level. I think the price is likely to dip after for quite a bit. It may be one of those moments when we have quite a big correction. But once we go above 100k, once we establish 100k as support level, I think that's where the retail market mania will kick in. I think that's when everyone will be jumping into Bitcoin. Bitcoin will be on all the headlines because it's such a huge milestone. And I think that's when we will have another parabolic move up, either towards the top of the market cycle, or potentially that will be still a couple of moves up from there, if that makes sense. So overall, I remain very bullish when it comes to this market cycle. I don't think it's ending anytime soon. Like I said, it doesn't mean that we won't have corrections, but talking about slightly longer time scale and the market cycle overall, I don't think we are anywhere near the top. And of course, what will happen with Bitcoin? Well, that will then fuel ETH and altcoins and NFTs and so on. The higher Bitcoin will go, well, the higher the prices of all other coins will be. The longer the cycle, the more of those sideways movements we experience, the more likely it is that we'll have some small altcoin seasons or NFTs potentially picking up again. There seems to be a bit more activity in the NFT market over the last couple of days. I'm not sure if that's a sign of a mini NFT bull run or not, but if Bitcoin continues going largely sideways, then that certainly is going to be an opportunity for altcoins and NFTs to rally. If we look at ETH, well, that continues on this really strong move up. But this is not a sign of ETH getting overheated. If we look at what happened earlier this year, this is typical for ETH going towards the top of the, well, local peak or something like that. What we are experiencing right now, it's much more like these movements here when ETH is slowly building up, but it's not this sudden parabolic move over a couple of weeks or so when ETH pretty much just doubles in price. I think that's still to come. So just to sum up this video, I expect Bitcoin to just have quite slow, somewhat bumpy ride towards the end of the year. I think we may hit 100k by the end of this year. We may stay in an 80 to 90k territory. That's also perfectly possible. But I don't think we'll see market cycle end anytime soon. And some people are saying that, well, Bitcoin always peaks in December. No, it doesn't. That was only in 2017 when we had Bitcoin peak in December. In the previous cycle, it was in November, and the one before that it was in June. So there's absolutely no rule that Bitcoin has to peak at the end of the year. Of course, we may see something like this, as we had towards the end of last year, and well, in fact, January of this year, where we have this sudden parabolic move up and then quite substantial correction. That's entirely possible, but I don't think that will be the end of the market cycle. Later this week, I'll be making a video about my exit strategy and taking profits. And it's not because I think that the market cycle is ending anytime soon, but I think it makes perfect sense to prepare your exit strategy way in advance, because you don't want to start thinking about cashing out when you are seeing this massive parabolic move up and you don't know whether this market is going to peak today, tomorrow, or in a week's time. It's better to prepare for it well in advance, because the best strategy is actually taking profits on the way up and then reallocating those profits in other cryptos or other assets. So we'll be talking about this later this week. I think that's it for today. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. If you like the content, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye.